Good morning, everyone. I'm Tom Edge, and I'll be presenting service today. Tina Jones and Steve Israel are providing technical assistance, and Ted Goldman is our musical director. Please be aware that we are recording this service, and it will be posted on our YouTube page. For privacy, we do pause the recording during joys and concerns. Also, at the end of service today, after we extinguish the chalice, we will have announcements. And I'm sure I don't have to remind most of you, today is also Potluck Sunday, so hopefully you can all stick around. We greet you today as you join us in a wider search for truth and purpose. In this quest, may we encounter one another with open hearts and minds. May we inspire each other to consider new questions and seek deeper meaning. And may we cultivate wisdom and compassion. Let all who enter this place see a welcome face, hear a kind word, and find comfort in this community. May all that we do and say here today help us to be a force for positive change in the world. If this is your first service at MVUUC, please note we are a diverse group with varying interests and beliefs, and our services are varied in format, tone, and topic. We encourage you to attend or view several services to gain a good understanding of our congregation. If you'd like to receive our weekly email newsletter, which is the best way to know about current events at MVUUC, please complete a blue information card located in the pockets in the back of chairs. This will help us to learn about you and answer any questions you might have. Please leave completed cards on the front greeting table. Please take a moment to think of all your friends at MVUUC. Greet them here in person or with a comment in the chat box. Let us support one another. Thank you, Ted, for having my back. The chalice will be lit today by Susan Rogers. Please join me in reading these words by Pat Uribe Lichty for the lighting of the chalice. They appear as a comment in the chat box. We face a challenge to democracy, a challenge that calls us to hope in moments of despair, a challenge that asks us to persist in the faith that we can and must make a difference. May our flaming chalice recommit us to truth in our words and our actions, that we may live as we believe people should live. And for our first musical selection, I will turn it over to Ted.
So we've sung this one a couple of times. We've sung it as a closing song, and I think we've sung it after reflection, but we've never sung this one with the kiddos. And this seemed like the perfect song for our patriotism service. Kiddos, for you guys, patriotism is feeling love and pride in one's own country. But what I like about this song is that it also acknowledges that other people have their own love and pride for their countries as well. I'll read just a little bit of the lyrics before we sing it. This is from the second verse. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaf and pine. But other lands have sunlight too, and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Wrong sound. If you want the melody, by the way, it's on 159 in your books, or you can look at the lyrics up there if you already know the tune. the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaf and pine. But other lands have sunlight too, and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Oh, hear my song, thou God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land and for mine. And now we'll sing our kids out. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go.
Thank you, Ted. I always hate the fact that I come up with great ideas for music when I'm up here and it's too late. No, there's a song in the musical Chess, Anthem, where one of the main characters is about to defect from his country and is being asked about that decision. And it's essentially about how he could never truly leave his country, that he's devoted to something that was there long before it had any particular name, any flag, any army, and that would always live on inside of him. Next time. We got this. We got this. If I say it out loud, we will make it happen. Our opening words today come from Thomas Paine's The American Crisis, #1. These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country. But he that stands by it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered. Yet we have this consolation with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. It is dearness only that gives everything its value. Heaven knows how to put a proper price upon its goods, and it would be strange indeed if so celestial an article as freedom should not be highly rated. I call not upon a few, but upon all. Not on this state or that state, but on every state. Up and help us. Lay your shoulders to the wheel. Better have too much than too little, when so great an object is at stake. Let it be told to the future world that in the depth of winter, when nothing but hope and virtue could survive, that the city and the country, alarmed at one common danger, came forth to meet and repulse it. This seems an appropriate time of year to reflect upon our relationship to our country and through it to one another. We sit here 2 days before Election Day, less than a week before Veterans Day, with Thanksgiving quickly approaching. Later this month, we will mark the 160th anniversary of the Gettysburg Address, wherein Abraham Lincoln called for a new birth of freedom and marked the Civil War as an extension of the forces of liberty set forth in 1776. It is arguably the time of year that truly forces us to think about our identity as Americans and what that is supposed to mean to us. This is sometimes difficult for me to do. Part of this difficulty, I suppose, comes from the ways we are often asked to avoid questioning that relationship to our country in any constructive way. Back in 2002, comedian Lewis Black joked about that year's Super Bowl pregame show. It was, in his words, a, quote, 3.5, 4-hour salute to America brought to you by the NFL. If we're being honest, what he described was less a salute to America than a series of reassuring words and images. With music, pageantry, and a healthy dose of red, white, and blue, it was designed to appeal to a nation still reeling from the shock of 9/11. For Lewis Black, it was a bit over the top. As he put it, by the time they were kicking off, I was actually sick of freedom. I pined to be oppressed. While it did not go quite that far, I relate to his feelings of unease. Many of us can remember those days, weeks, months after the events of September 11th, 2001. We were shaken. We were afraid of whether something like that could happen again. And as we considered that possibility, we were quickly faced with anonymous letters laced with anthrax and a swift move towards war with Afghanistan. These were scary, uncertain times. And for many Americans, patriotism offered a chance to feel reassured and reconnected. We flew flags, we tied yellow ribbons around trees, we donated to support the families of those who lost loved ones on 9/11. And I get it. I understand precisely why we did those things and how it brought us a measure of comfort. In many ways, what we sought at that time was similar to what Thomas Paine offered in our opening words today. Less than a year after he offered his definitive statement on independence in his pamphlet Common Sense, Paine now tried to appeal to these disparate states to come together behind a common cause and a shared destiny. To his credit, he did not attempt to sugarcoat the problem at hand. He knew the sacrifices that would be necessary to bring their vision of independence into reality. Perhaps with a nod towards Shakespeare's Henry V, he tried to rally the sagging spirits of the colonists by telling them how sweet their victory would be precisely because of the difficulties they had overcome. In these efforts, he sought to forge a new American identity, one that crossed boundaries between states, between city and country, and instead saw them united behind a common desire for freedom. At its best, this is what patriotism can offer, a vision of what is possible through united efforts. But patriotism, as we know, has its limits, because even at its best, patriotism is still rooted in the idea of us versus them. It cannot be separated from our ideas of who is included and excluded from the nation to which we belong. The examples here are too numerous to properly summarize, but they have touched upon the experiences of almost every conceivable group. Think of indigenous people, the original inhabitants of this country who were systematically displaced, categorized as savages, and faced conditions we would now legally classify as genocide. Our government would not even recognize them as citizens until 1924. Think of Asian Americans subject to brutal violence and segregation across the West, legal exclusion after the passage of the Chinese Exclusion Act, not to mention the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. Asian immigrants to the United States could not become naturalized citizens until the 1950s. Think of Latinos, both those who have recently crossed borders and those who watched the borders cross them more than a century and a half ago. They've been disenfranchised, kicked off their lands, economically exploited, and lambasted as criminals in our own time by the highest officials in our land. Think of all the European immigrant groups who were told that they were lazy, that they didn't want to learn English, that they kept too much to themselves, or that they could never truly become American because of the land of their origin. They faced boycotts of their businesses, lynchings, and demands that they go back where they came from. Think of religious minorities, the targets of various forms of legal and extra-legal discrimination. States like Massachusetts tried to disenfranchise Catholics, arguing that they would always be more devoted to Rome than to the United States. Jews were subject to systemic anti-Semitism in employment, housing, and education, alongside conspiracy theories that they secretly controlled our political and economic life. Muslims continue to deal with the fallout of 9/11 more than 2 decades later, amid religious, racial, and ethnic profiling, the monitoring of mosques, and ongoing hate crimes. And given what I teach for a living, it is impossible for me to think about these questions of patriotism without considering the Black experience in America. Slavery provided the lens through which our leaders saw Black people, regardless of whether they were free or enslaved. Going back to the colonial era, there were laws against them serving in the military, freely traveling, engaging in some kinds of trade or commerce, or marrying white people. On the eve of the Civil War, the Supreme Court codified this in Dred Scott v. Sanford, with Chief Justice Roger Taney writing, "They had no rights which the white man was bound to respect." Through slavery, Jim Crow, and mass incarceration, our nation has continually placed the rights of African Americans outside the protection of the law. More often than not, people who challenged these practices and ideas have been accused of being un-American or anti-American. We have not gotten into the questions that arise when we add gender, sexuality, disability, and other markers of identity to this overview, and consider the ways that they factored into who was considered us or them. But a part of me knows that these conditions I just described did not go unchallenged. Every single one of these groups asserted their right to share in what this country has to offer. Every one of them reminded people of their own contributions in shaping our history. Every group that has been treated as an outsider has made its case to expand our collective idea of who is considered an American. In short, whether looking at the language of our founders, their own roles in building the nation, or the principles that we claim to hold dear, they have used appeals to patriotism to argue for greater inclusiveness and opportunity. And sometimes, sadly, while arguing to be included themselves, they adopted the language of exclusion for others. Rather than challenging inequality itself, they asserted that it was all right to exclude other people, but that they weren't the same. They deserved better. They deserved a chance to discriminate against others. They deserved the power to decide who is American and who is not. As a Unitarian Universalist, this is where I get frustrated and where I see hope. I see hope every time one of my students makes a connection between the oppression of one group and the oppression of another. I see hope when activists from disparate parts of the globe support one another's struggles against inequality. I see hope in people using their privilege, position, and power to speak out against the oppression of other people, especially when they help to center the voices of oppressed people themselves. This is why I turned to Thomas Paine earlier in the talk. He urged Americans to come together in defense of their freedoms. At no point, however, did he call for the oppression of the British, the denial of their rights, or the end of their own right to self-rule and liberty. Here, we can think of patriotism as a floor rather than a ceiling. In talking about patriotism at its best, it provides the opportunity to look at the people closest to us, those in our own nation, and address their most pressing concerns through concerted effort. We can identify with one another through that shared marker, American, and think about the nation we want to create together. As Unitarian Universalists, and even as Americans, we do not have to stop there. Our principles remind us that we are all connected and that our support for justice knows no boundaries. If that is so, then whenever we recognize the injustices facing our fellow citizens, we should be cognizant of how these same issues affect people everywhere. They should represent the bare minimum that we want to see for the rest of the world, rather than seeing these rights as the exclusive domain of Americans. We can join with like-minded people everywhere to bring about the positive changes we wish to see. In this sense, patriotism does not need to restrict our notion of who deserves justice. Rather, it provides a starting point for action in our own communities, states, and country. But it also requires a sense of engagement and a willingness to push back against those who would use patriotism as a weapon against others. Sadly, we have repeatedly seen the willingness of those in power to use the charge of un-American to suppress dissent, deport activists, and justify violence. From the Palmer raids after World War I to McCarthyism to the War on Terror, we have been told in so many ways that you are either with us or against us. Powerful interests have deemed it unpatriotic to question our leaders or demand a more just world. And somehow, they still get away with it, with never having to explain exactly what they mean by patriotic or American. So let us pledge to start asking those difficult questions, especially of our elected leaders. If they tell us that it is un-American to demand a living wage, universal health care, affordable housing, reproductive rights, or an end to police brutality, we should ask them why. If they insist that these things go against our cherished American freedoms, we should insist that they define what freedom actually means. If they wish to use patriotism as a weapon, we should force them to say explicitly whom they are excluding from its protection and whom they wish to harm. The Trappist monk and theologian Thomas Merton once wrote, "When I criticize a system, they think I criticize them. And that is, of course, because they accept the system and identify themselves with it." Patriotism asks us to identify with a national system, but it does not guarantee that we all have the same vision of what that system might become. Nor does it need to preclude us from recognizing the humanity, dignity, and struggles of others. We can use Merton's logic here towards a different purpose. Whether we like it or not, people around the world will equate us, as Americans, with the actions taken by our nation, or in some cases, the actions not taken. It is incumbent upon us then to look at our systems and ask, are they a reflection of who we are or who we wish to be? How do our systems portray us to our own citizens and the rest of the world? And if those systems are not in alignment with your values, what do you intend to do about it? When Thomas Paine called for action in 1776, he warned against those who only supported the revolution when it was easy or convenient. For him, the summer soldier and sunshine patriot would shrink when needed most and shirk their duties to a fledgling nation. He did not anticipate the rise of a different kind of sunshine patriot. Those who wrap themselves in the flag and insist that the nation is perfect as is, that it never needs to change. A fear of change has never been a UU principle. If we wish to put our principles into action, it will start with pushing back against these new sunshine patriots in the voting booth and in the streets. We will call for a patriotism that seeks to protect, not harm. We will call for a patriotism that is humble enough to look at the rest of the world for inspiration as others have been inspired by us. We will call for a patriotism that values every single American without devaluing the lives of the rest of the world. And if we succeed, it will no longer be necessary for politicians to argue over who loves America more, or fanatically insist that this is the greatest country on the face of the earth. Our record will then speak for itself. May it be so. For our next musical selection, again, I will hand things over to Ted.
This is a story song about Ellis Island, and it's kind of hard to sing story songs together. If you happen to know it, I'd love the company. Otherwise, just enjoy the story. On the first day of January, 1892, they opened Ellis Island and they let the people through. And the first to cross the threshold of that Isle of Hope and Tears was Annie Moore of Ireland, who was only 15 years. Isle of Hope, I live tears, I love freedom, I love fears, but it's not the isle that you left behind. Isle of hunger, isle of pain, isle you'll never see again, but the isle of home is always on your mind. In a little bag she carried all her past and history, and her dreams for the future in the land of liberty. And courage is the passport when the old world disappears. But there's no future in the past for 15 years. Isle of hope, isle of tears, isle of freedom, isle of fears, but it's not the isle that you left behind. Isle of hunger, isle of pain, isle you'll never see again, but the isle of home is always on your mind. When they closed down Ellis Island in 1943, 17 million people had come there for sanctuary. And in springtime when I came here and I stepped onto its piers, I thought of how it must have been when you're 15 years. Isle of hope, isle of tears, isle of freedom, isle of fears, but it's not the isle that you left behind. Isle of hunger, isle of pain, isle you'll never see again, but the isle of home is always on your mind.
I think when she came through, the Secretary of the Treasury was there for the occasion and gave her like a $10 gold piece to mark that she was the first person coming through. Now, we pass our offertory basket. Visitors, we welcome you to donate cash or via our PayPal link using the QR code in the basket. Please note that what predominantly supports MVUC are pledges, annual pledges by our members or friends. The yellow cards located in the pockets on the back of the chairs are used to indicate this support and can be placed in the offertory basket. We encourage anyone that believes in our mission to consider becoming a member and to pledge support. Please email news, that's NEWS, at mvuuc.org if you are interested in learning about the benefits of being a member and how to pledge. Now is the time for the sharing of joys, concerns, and milestones. Tina, please stop recording at this time. want to thank Ted for incorporating that moment of silence into our weekly service, because it is one of the few times I can shut my brain off during the week, and I really appreciate that. So thank you, Ted. Our closing words today are from Andrea Hawkins Camper. May we see all as it is, and may it all be as we see it. May we be the ones to make it as it should be, for if not us, who? If not now, when? This is answering the cry of justice with the work of peace. This is redeeming the pain of history with the grace of wisdom. This is the work we are called to do, and this is the call we answer now. To be the barrier and the bridge, to be the living embodiment of our principles, to be about the work of building the beloved community, to be a people of intention and a people of conscience. Please join me in reading the words from Maureen Killeran for extinguishing our chalice that can be found in the order of service or the Zoom chat box. We extinguish this chalice flame, daring to carry forward the vision of this free faith, that freedom, reason, and justice will one day prevail in this nation and across the earth. Thank you, Susan. Now is the time for announcements. Before I put out the general call, David Love asked me to remind people that we will be hosting a Thanksgiving dinner here on Thanksgiving Day at 6 p.m. There is both sign up online, which I'm sure will be available in the newsletter this week, and there's a physical sign up out in the social hall this morning. He said that a number of side dishes he is already providing. I believe he said Susan's providing, or no, somebody else was providing 2 pies. I can't remember whom. But that what they really would appreciate is someone who is willing to donate a turkey. And David has said he is perfectly willing to cook the turkey. He just cannot afford to buy the turkey right now. So if you wish to donate that, please talk to David Love about it and make sure that he knows you're willing. If you want to participate and donate anything else, of course you are welcome to do so. Again, 6 p.m. on Thanksgiving Day right here. Are there any other announcements? Lisa.
Not yet. It's not the blood drive yet. That's not till March. I'm giving you all a little break till December, January. Then I'm coming for you. I am full of other people's announcements today. This is from Megan, and it is an announcement that the Anti-Racism Reading Group is on Thursday, 11/16 at 7 p.m. via Zoom. There will be a link in the newsletter. They will discuss Chapter 1 of the book, Mistakes and Miracles. If you'd like to join in or get more information, you can email Megan at president@mvuuc.org in order to join in. We hope to see you there.
Yoga at Wednesday, 6 p.m. on Zoom, from about 6 to 7. Sometimes it's 35 minutes. Sometimes it's 45 minutes. Sometimes, if we're chatting, it's an hour. But it is chair yoga, so everything is sitting down and raising the arms, lifting the legs, twisting, having a good time. So join me.
All right, no other announcements, nothing via Zoom? Perfect. All right, then after our closing song today, we invite everyone in person to stay for potluck. Our closing song for today is hymn number 108, How Can I Keep From Singing?
Familiar tune, but just one verse, so I'll play through once, just as a reminder. My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, though far off hymn that hails a new creation. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. Since love prevails in heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? Lovely.
Yes.